You ready, question and issue?
I'll be ready in a second.
Yep.
I'll be ready in a second. All right. I think that I am ready. To my Guru and Protector, Manjushri, who holds a discard, things as they are, whose challenges and thoughts.
He teaches in 16 ways with the patient love of a father for his only son. All creatures caught in the prison of desire, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. You, whose dragon thunder proclamation of the Dharma arouses us to discover our delusions and frees us from the iron
chains of our karma, whose powerful source of wisdom hews thousands of sprouts, clean away the darkness of all ignorance. I entreat you, Manjushri, as perfection for Bodhisattva, who has been pure from the beginning. O Manjushri, loving one, will you bring of your wisdom, darkness and close in my mind, enlighten my intelligence, wisdom, so I gain insight in the Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. Until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly, the regulations, and I like by listening to the teachings, may attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. The regulations, I like by listening to the teachings, may attain the state of Buddha to be able to benefit sentient beings. For refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. By the regulations to the teachings made in the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. Right, maybe I'll just tilt the camera just a little bit more. I look awesome.
You look empty.
Yeah. All phenomena are like apparitions. All right. So, sorry for being a minute or two late. So, how are we doing? So we started to look at cultivating the patience that pays no heed to those who cause harm. We started to look at that, I think that on Thursday, right? So it's part of the section that explains how to arrest anger or fury towards those who wrong you, which means that they give you what you dislike, what you do not want, which is either suffering or they undermine your reputation, they have a sense of contempt to you, they give you harsh words. Remember, those are the objects that give rise to anger. So, cultivating the patience that pays no heed to those who cause harm. The title itself was translated quite nicely in this book, The Essence of Manjushri's Speech. So, although it's not a literal translation, I think that still gives a sense of what this patience is about. Yeah. So page 208, this whole section comes out of the heading of the patience of making light of what causes harm. So rather than just paying no heed, it's kind of, I think that it's about making the sense of being hurt, that injured, take it in a lighter sense, right? Because we're already harmed. We already have, I think, a sense of, in many different situations, our mind or heart are already wounded. So it's making the situation lighter.
That came up in the discussion group.
So anything
just that we were talking about actually purification and how that enabled, how that helped.
Yeah.
And it was that sense, actually I find the reasoning as well, and how that it makes the situation lighter.
I mean, the practice of patience seems to be overall encapsulated in making our heart become lighter in the face of injury or harm. So when suffering arises in our mind or in our body and mind, so we willingly accepting suffering, or when we develop certitude in the Dhamma, or here we pay no heed to someone that has wronged us. In all those different situations, we're trying to develop. I don't know if a light-hearted attitude is the right way of going about it, but not to be so susceptible to being harmed.
It was contrasting to the heaviness of the feeling of anger.
Yeah.
So in that way, lightening that experience.
Yeah.
Not being light-hearted, but
yeah. Light-hearted sounds like no. That's kind of that. I would say, or at least here it says, making light of what causes harm. So it's. I think that, not letting that sense of heaviness and pain and so forth run too deep. All right. So let's look at the outline. So there are three main points: engaging the mind in the method of compassion. So if we think of what are the main points that we practice when we try to make our heart or mind become lighter in the face of injury. So we develop compassion to sentient beings. That's the first point. The second point is arresting the causes of anger. So arresting the causes of fury. And the third point is reflecting on unwanted occurrences being due to one's own fault, which I think that's probably another way of paraphrasing that in a free way. It's more like considering it from a karmic perspective and taking responsibility for our own karma, right? So developing compassion to others, arresting the causes of anger, and taking responsibility for own karma. I think that's how you can say that. So we didn't get to talk much about engaging the mind in the method of compassion and arresting the causes of fury, what we've covered in the previous week. So let's do that now, just to make sure that we able to retain that, but also if you have any points that come to mind or any other things that you wanted to bring up or clarify, we can do that. So engaging the mind in the method of compassion. If you were to summarize the verses that come under this section, I'll just show the outline again. If you were to summarize it in a free-flowing way as a process of argumentation that you work with in your own mind when you're facing injury, how would you think about it in light of what Shantideva says in order to develop compassion to others? Also people at home, people here, people at home. Wow.
The first thing that comes to my mind is that they must be suffering in order to be causing suffering.
So they must be suffering in order to cause suffering.
Yeah, and they're probably suffering even more than I would from the harm they might cause me.
Yeah.
And not just in the present, but they're causing more suffering for themselves in the future. And so because of that, I develop compassion for them instead of getting angry at them and making the situation worse.
Yeah.
I think about how they're suffering, and that the suffering is coming from ignorance of not knowing how to create causes happiness.
Yeah, which is exactly what Shantideva says here. He says that when they harm you, first of all, you recognize how people cause themselves harm, injury, even to the point in which some people commit suicide because of their own disturbed state of mind. So if people are capable of inflicting harm upon themselves now, there's no wonder that they also inflict harm upon others. So that's one point. And the second point, which is something that you kind of specifically mentioned, is that you also think of how they behave in a negative way. So not only they create negative karma, but also the states of mind of anger, hatred, and so forth make the mind so agitated. They create negative actions that result in future suffering. So not only do it results in suffering in this life, but they also create causes for suffering in future lifetimes. So that's a way of developing compassion towards them. So Koala Kate says, "They're suffering. I will take the suffering." Well, that's a practice of Tonglen, giving and taking meditation. So you can also apply it in this situation. But here, particularly, kind of you think of their suffering, and you think that they are in a pitiful situation. They are compounding the suffering in this life and also in future lives.
But it is, also like just the habituation of a lot of stuff, that we just and just that pervasive nature of stuff. I think it's during these growth opportunities when not only is somebody else experiencing suffering, but we are too. We're all experiencing suffering. That it really gives you an opportunity to, it's where I sort of see patience as it's an opportunity to take stock. It's an opportunity to put the brakes on, to say, what is really happening here? And it's everything that Cheryl said. But I really liked what Yeshua said this morning, that, like there's conventional reality, and then there's ultimate reality. And I sort of see patience as the opportunity to sort of loosen up on what appears to be happening. And it gives you more of an opportunity to develop a more less harmful, a more satisfactory way of managing something rather than just going back to old habits, just doing what's pulled out of you, We can often just do that, just continue on with the habit.
Yeah, so the different ways to do it, one of them is through developing compassion to sentient beings. Another one, if you take stock of reality, conventional truths and ultimate truths, you can also link it up with patience of certitude about the Dhamma. So kind of, you can use that in order to reinforce your understanding of how things appear to you in a certain way, but they do not exist in that way. So, not reacting to that in a strong way.
Really thinking about, because patience is, they're presenting patience as the main tool that we use when working with anger. And so, it's been said that the best way to get rid of anger is at the roots, by seeing the emptiness of its nature. So when you're experiencing patience, what would be, if you know the logic of it all, which I think, we do know that, because how do we take that next step further to actually engage patience, apart from just being like it outwardly, looking like a block? But what should we be doing with our mind for the practice of patience, apart from the intellectual stuff that we have just done? And so, it's all these words like seeing it as an illusion, seeing it as a reflection on a lake. Seeing it as a projection you know, what I'm seeing in them is really something that's within me. And so that's what I've been playing with, is how, in my mind, how I can actually engage patients from more of a visceral level, and not such an intellectual level.
Well, it begins with, I think that it begins with an intellectual level, and this is what Shantideva says here. It presents the intellectual level in order to engage the mind in a thought process to reach a certain conclusion, and then try to habituate the mind with that conclusion in order to reduce the mental disturbance. And that's the meaning of patience. The meaning of patience is a mind that is not disturbed, a mind that dwells in a natural state without being disturbed by harm, by suffering, the cause of suffering, and so forth. So in order to prevent the mind, or to reduce that mental agitation, disturbance, this inability to contain a certain situation, if we just tell ourselves, don't get angry, it's probably not going to, or don't be agitated, it's not going to work. So Shantideva presents the logical process that we go through, which I think that probably we know based upon a personal experience that if we try it once or twice, it doesn't work that much. You can think of, you get angry with another person and you think of different arguments such as the ones that Shantideva explains here, and it can work on a shallow level, but your mind is still, or on the surface, but your mind is still disturbed. It is still disturbed because, at least my mind is still disturbed in certain situations because I'm still a beginner in the practice of patience. I haven't developed a lot of familiarity with using those arguments, taking them to heart, and really in a powerful way, making sure that I reduce that sense of mental disturbance. So I think that, at least the way that I understand that, there is no other way around it other than again and again and again doing the same thing, again and again and again, thinking of the arguments, again and again thinking about it from different perspectives, and then trying harder, stronger over a long time to reduce that mental disturbance.
So that's sort of staying within conventional reality, not trying to move into viewing it more from an ultimate nature.
Well, here Shantideva presents arguments both from the conventional level and the ultimate level. So I think that we said in the previous week that you encounter a certain situation and you want to try to apply the three types of patience with many different arguments in order to deal with one single situation. So in that single situation, you attack it from a conventional level, but you can also attack it from the ultimate level in reminding yourself that things do not exist in the way that it appears. So it's not only conventional level. You're taking care of many different arguments in order to deal with one situation. And again, the idea is that you use different points of view, different angles, different arguments in order to try to reduce the inability to bear a certain situation.
So do you think it's reasonable then, if you're trying to view it from that ultimate point of view, to use the metaphors that they often use around emptiness, seeing things as an illusion, seeing it as a projection, seeing it as a reflection, seeing it,
Well, we did speak about it in the previous week, the verse that Shantideva says that we should view sentient beings like emanations. So you are viewing them from, this is one of the arguments that you use for the cultivation of patience. So it's not that you have to do either this or that. If you can do all of them, look at patience from all different perspectives. Remind yourself that sentient beings appear to you in a particular way when you get angry with them. They appear to you as if they exist independently in and of themselves, without being controlled by other factors. But they do not exist in that way. They are like illusions. That's one way of dealing with anger. Or
I guess that's what I'm saying, is just taking it to that next step.
What do you mean taking it to the next step?
Has presented it first. I think it's people can understand it more from a perspective of, that they're suffering, that they're habituated by their past actions, that this is our karma, that this is happening between us, by them getting angry at me, they're just reinforcing their habit. And, you know, I have a choice here whether I just continue to, you know, reinforce my habit, whether I try and practice patience. And that sort of is intellectually, conventionally dealing with it. And that's what Sentient has been teaching now. That's what he's been telling us now. Listen, in the past, has been, that in the past, he has talked about this mirage, just seeing them as an emanation and stuff. It's almost like it's a bit back to front. It's easier to go through this current argument and then move into that they are just an emanation, they are just a projection. Once you have gone through the previous discussion in your head.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I don't totally understand what is the distinction that you're wanting to make.
The two different processes in which you're practicing patience. So one is the intellectual argument, and the other one is more from an emptiness. You know,
yeah, but why is emptiness not intellectual? All of those things are intellectual. Kind of you're working with arguments, and then you need to let them influence your mind. You know, there's not an intellectual and non-intellectual approach to patience. You start with intellectual, and then kind of you habituate your mind till it becomes a second nature. So in that sense, you can say that it becomes not intellectual, it becomes instinctual.
I see it more as going from the left hemisphere, which is a very logical hemisphere, to the right hemisphere. That's not so logical, but more conceptual. So I guess that's the differences that I'm saying in the two methods. I mean, I guess they're both intellectual. But one is more from like seeing something as a mirage, as a dream, as an emanation, is not logical.
It's totally logical. What do you mean?
It's not a left hemisphere.
Totally. Well, what do you mean? It's totally logical. I mean, if you just think of sentient beings being like illusions or things being like illusion without applying the right process of reasoning, you know, to use the correct reason why sentient beings are just like illusions, I think that you're not getting your meditation process correct. I mean, this is my view. You know, you're not following a right meditation process because, you know, all this presentation says that use a certain reason in order to come to a conclusion. And then when you come to that conclusion, then you meditate on that in order to habituate your mind more and more with that conclusion. So you start with intellectual, you might say, but then you want to make it instinctual, but to make it kind of part of like a second nature to you, you have to go through the correct reasoning. Otherwise, how would you?
So the reasoning that somebody is more like an emanation is because things don't exist in the way that we think they exist.
Yeah, totally.
We also mentioned the prior reason that the person can cause conditions.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, kind of when I said it has to be intellectual, it doesn't mean to say that you need to then study, that you need to necessarily study for 7 years before you can start doing that. No, all of us can start right now. You know, we can think that the meaning of being like an illusion is that things do not exist in the way that they appear to me, which is the first reason that you would use. Now, so no, you get it. No, there's a situation that is upsetting, you know, and it's really upsetting your mind, and you think that, well, things do not exist in the way that they appear to me. They exist as if they exist. They appear to me as if they exist independently, but they do not exist independently. So it's not just keeping it at the level of, I shouldn't get angry because things are like an illusion. Now, if you stop at this point without thinking that they appear to me in one way, but they do not exist in this way, they appear to me to exist independently, but they do not exist independently. If you don't really go through the process and you just tell yourself that things are like an illusion, they're like emanation, I don't think that your meditation will become deeper. I think that it would be quite...
The whole premise of things don't exist in the way that we think they do is, you know, dependent arising causes and conditions. You know, it's all based on the concept of impermanence, that things which is a fundamental lifestyle meditation.
Yeah.
And I think after a while, after a number of years, like I think you just take that for granted, like things are changing. I mean, and so these days, the Buddhist study program for people who are into Buddhism a bit more than just it's nice, that is almost a given. It's a given. That things are changing, things are dependent arise. I mean, maybe we need reminding of it again and again when something does arise in our mind, and all this, that becomes an opportunity for practice, and that's what this is all about.
I want to know if you're any sort of conceptual understanding of that. Like conceptually, I can understand dependent arising, based like at a very basic level. But I've got a long way to go before I can just, that conceptual realization where you look at it and you see it, you don't have to think about it. I think that's.
Well, I mean, that's what is enlightenment, because enlightenment. Who knows is close to that, but yeah.
Well, I think that you would, when something upsets my mind, I still react to a certain situation, sometimes with anger. So although I've rationalized through that process, although I can recite this argument to the other argument, still my mind needs a lot of habituation with constantly going through those reasoning and then making the mind more and more familiar with seeing the disadvantages of anger, seeing how my mind reacts in an irrational way, how things do not exist in the way they appear, and so on and so forth. I know how to say that, but it doesn't, and I've been around for, I don't know, a couple of decades, but it doesn't mean to say that I came to see everything around me as forever changing. Still, when I get angry, I totally assent to the appearances as if things exist in a concrete way, in a stable way, in an unchanging way. Like, for example, someone rubs me the wrong way, and then I tend to think that they've always been annoying. They will always be annoying. Whenever I come across that person, there is that kind of discomfort that arises in my mind. I mean, it's not always like that, but it happens. So although I can say the words, and although if you ask me on a superficial level, if I believe that things around me are changing from moment to moment, I would say yes. Still, the way that I react to situation is on the basis of that, trusting that things actually do not change. I mean, it's not, of course, if you ask me about it, I wouldn't admit that things are permanent, that things are stable and so forth, but my mind still react to the appearances if they do. So that's one point. Another point is that we do accept that things are like, the things are dependent arisings, but dependent arisings have different levels. So it's not enough to just recognize that things depend upon causes and conditions and the change from moment to moment in order to completely understand the meaning of dependent origination. There are more levels to that. So that's a good start. So we remind ourselves that when we get angry with another person, there's a sense of permanence and stability and endurance that appears to us with respect to the person, as if they've always been like that and they will never change. But there are more levels to dependent arising that we need to understand in order to be able to take, I think, patience to the next level or to a more deeper level. So, for example, the most subtle level of dependent origination is understanding how things exist as mere imputations, merely imputed outwardly by a mind, and they don't have any essence. So we can understand how things change from moment to moment. It doesn't mean that we have understood the lack of inherent existence. So we do speak about those things often, but I think that in terms of making the mind become fully aware of that and also integrating them in our mind, we need constant repetition. Constant repetition, a lot of repetition, and also to go deeper into our understanding of dependent origination.
And you do that just through constant repetition?
You do that with, I think, first of all, they said that you need study, reflection, and meditation. So it sounds as if it sounds as if kind of first off you study for a certain amount of year or a certain topic, or a certain topic, and then you finish it and you get some graduation certificate, and then you do contemplation for a certain duration, and then there needs to be a meditation. But I think that it doesn't have to be like that, in that we listen to teachings, for example, and when we listen to teachings, we constantly think about them, and then we try to use our immediate situation to think of the teaching and reach on conclusion. Once we get to a conclusion, then we need to meditate on that, in a sense of make the mind become more familiar with that. So when I say constant repetition, I mean that we constantly repeat that process, reinforce that. It's I've studied this text a few times before, but I still feel that whenever I study it again, particularly here in the Patience chapter, there's so many things that I discover again and again, or I think about them from different perspectives. So thinking about them again and again, I think that it's enriching. You go deeper, you get different perspectives on this material each time that you encounter it, which makes it overall, I think, more deeper. You allow the mind to be influenced by it in a more deepened way.
I like what you just said, and especially in relation to first we listen to teachings, and then we do contemplation, and then through that contemplation, gets you wrapped into what we're listening to. He's been teaching the same thing. He then says, and then you develop an understanding of a valid cognizer, which then becomes the object of the meditation, and you gain that through listening to teachings and contemplation. So you're not really ready for meditation until you've got that valid cognizer at that point. So with this, what would you say is that valid cognizer? How do we know with patience? What are we looking at?
Well, you have with patience, the nature of patience, you could say, is a mind that is undisturbed, right? So how do you cultivate a mind that is undisturbed? You're working with different arguments. So one of the arguments is that sentient beings have no freedom. They do not harm you independently. They are governed by other causes and conditions, and the causes and conditions that govern them also in turn depend upon other causes and conditions. There are no independent causes. So you think about the arguments that Shantideva presented here. First of all, you listen to that. Then you start to, I think, check your own mind, and you see how your disturbing emotions depend upon other factors. They depend upon external conditions, but mainly internal conditions, particularly ignorance, incorrect mental attention. And then you see that also each one of them in turn depends upon other causes and conditions. So you think about it again and again, and you develop first of all, you develop a correct assumption with respect to them. And then when you think about it again and again, repeatedly, at some point you come to realize it, to the point in which you're developing an incontrovertible awareness, which means that you will never go back from that position. You have severed all doubt with respect to anger and the cause of anger not existing independently. They exist only in dependence upon cause and condition. So that's one. That's one example. Or we'd hear Shantideva explains how to develop compassion, how to use a situation where someone harms you as an opportunity for developing compassion to that person. So you go through the process by which you think that the person, first of all, is harming me because they're angry. Because they're angry, they lack control to the point in which they even harm themselves. To begin with, if they're in an angry state of mind, they're definitely not happy. But also, they might be creating causes for unhappiness in this life, but even more so for unhappiness in future lifetimes, suffering in future lifetimes. So you think about it to the point in which you develop a valid cognition with respect to that person who will experience suffering because of the negative actions. May they be free from suffering. So you can develop that as a valid cognition.
It's in one of the practices that I've been doing, they have the development of bodhicitta goes like I must free all hell beings, realm beings, animal beings, predators, etc. From the source of their happiness, which is the uplifted states of mind. Therefore, I must reach enlightenment.
Mm.
Who are the source of all my past and future happiness, of their afflictions, of their sources of which are the afflictions. Therefore, I must practice. So I mean that development of bodhicitta nicely sums up, in some respect, what you've been saying.
Yeah, and this is what's nice about studying material such as this. I mean, I'm not saying that, I'm saying it in a nice way, but I think that the benefit in studying something like that is that then you go back to practices that we do regularly. And you find that you can make them richer, more alive, use more arguments, they become more potent. You understand what it means to that sentient beings are the causes, the sources for your happiness in the past, present, and future. And also you have a greater commitment to attain the state of enlightenment, not by yourself alone. So you use whatever we study here in other modules just in order to reach deeper, to dig deeper into those recitations, practices, and so forth. Let's just make sure that we try to cover what Geshe-la covered today, because I think that I had a couple of discussions with people after class and they wanted to touch upon a few points. So let's just push forward a little bit.
Can I very quickly ask, just, in this topic heading, it says a reflection on unwanted occurrences, and then the first sub-topic is talking about the harm when you, we can really think about those two things together in terms of patience comfort. Like the way we colloquially in English talk about patience, it's not necessarily regard to somebody busy, it's just something, you're being patient, you're waiting for something to finish. We can equally think of both of these under the topic of patience.
Well, I think that we use the word patience in a Tibetan context, but also we're used to the word patience in a loose sense in English or in other languages. So it's always important, crucial to keep in mind that patience is an undisturbed mind from a Buddhist point of view. So it's not reacting to a certain situation. Of course, you don't want to react to a situation where you inflict harm when someone else is harming you. But that does not necessarily mean that if you don't retaliate to a certain situation, it doesn't mean that you're patient. If you let someone abuse you, you don't react to that situation, but your mind goes from bad to worse. You become more and more depressed. Then you're not patient. Even if you're not retaliating, if you allow your mind to be disturbed and so forth, it means that you're not patient. So you can react to a situation in a constructive way when you minimize mental disturbances. Then it means that you're patient. So when reacting to unwanted occurrences, when someone is harming you and so forth, with patience means that you do not allow the mind to just be impatient, to not be able to tolerate that. And then you apply whatever means or technique you have at hand, either to improve your situation, to stop the harm or the injury that you experience, and hopefully also to benefit the other person. So, arresting the causes of fury. So here we have a few interesting verses, 3 interesting verses. So the first one, it is unreasonable to be furious with a child if it is in their nature to lack understanding and act so. So you could say that in this verse and in the next one, you're exploring 2 situations. If a person is harming you, you can say that they are either negative, inherently negative, or that they are not inherently negative and it only occurs every once in a while. So in those 2 situations, if they're inherently bad, or they're not inherently bad, but something happens every once in a while or intermittently, Shantideva says in either cases, it doesn't make sense to get angry. If you get angry at someone, at something that is inherently bad, it's just like getting angry with fire that has a nature to burn. I mean, what's the point in getting angry at something if that is its nature? Second option is that if it's not inherently bad, if something happens adventitiously every once in a while, it's just like getting angry at space for allowing smoke to appearing in it. So you can say that someone is getting angry at you, they're harming you. Anger in their mind is something that occurs every once in a while or adventitiously. So why are you getting angry at that person? If anger arises in their mind every once in a while, it is just like getting angry with smoke, with a space or with sky when smoke arises in it. Does it make sense?
Makes sense.
Sorry?
Yeah, it makes sense.
But the way that he expresses that, it says that it speaks about the childish, right? So what is your understanding of someone that is childish?
So the childish is that they are unable to distinguish what they should be doing and what they should not be doing.
Mhm.
So their mind is immature.
What about ourselves? Are we childish?
Yes, very much.
Very much so.
I'll speak for myself.
Yeah. Well, childish in general is someone that is still controlled by karma and afflictions. If they're controlled by karma and afflictions, they're called childish. But particularly, kind of if you make it more specific, if you look at it from the presentation of grounds and paths, someone that hasn't reached the path of seeing is still considered to be a child. But if you have a perceptual realization of emptiness, you're no longer childish, you're an Arya being. If you haven't reached that state, then you're still called a childish. Or I think that in a more particular way, those that get angry with having no control whatsoever, which means that they're totally under the control of karma and afflictions. This is the meaning of the word childish in this particular situation. So then, the last point that Shantideva makes with respect to arresting the causes of fury is by examining the direct or indirect causes, one comes to see that being furious is unreasonable. So I think that this is something that probably most of us, if not all of us, have had before. Now, when someone is hitting you with a stick, do you get angry with a stick? We would say no. Do you get angry? No, we get angry with a person wielding that stick, but the person wielding the stick is controlled by anger. They don't have self-control. So if you were to get angry, then it makes sense to get angry with either the stick or with anger. But we don't do that. We get angry with the middlemen, right? The ones that doesn't have a sense of self-control. So that was what we've covered in the previous week. Then today we started with reflecting on unwanted occurrences being due to one's own faults. So the meaning of the actual is reflecting on the harm brought upon you by another as one's own fault in verse 42. Basically, it says that we've created cause and conditions for being harmed. So Previously, I caused similar harm to sentient beings. Therefore, it is right for this harm to occur to me, who is the agent of harm to sentient beings. Now, all these verses that come under this section, the actual meaning, I think that, as Geshe said, you take them as a practice of mind training, you apply it to yourself. You don't have to apply it to others, although you can. So when we experience a situation when someone is harming us unjustly, we could be also justly, in the sense that we know that we've been wrong and someone is then abusing us for our mistakes. But sometimes we also feel that we have done nothing wrong and the person is still harming us. So Shantideva says here that you also need to recognize your own faults, in a sense that one of the basic beliefs that we have is karma. So we do not experience situations that we haven't contributed to before, that we haven't done before. But it needs to be applied personally, rather than being a little bit insensitive in applying it to someone else. When someone else is suffering, you don't have to remind them that this is because their own karma. No. Or, if they're open to listen to it in this way, if they're Buddhists, if they're kind of born again Buddhists, so to speak, then maybe it will help them if you remind them that they can think of karma. But then if you just come across a situation when someone is in pain or suffering and so forth, then you just say, well, this is your karma, you've created it. It's probably insensitive. You're not being too skillful about it. And particularly when we think of, I think that often we come up with questions such as the ones that came up in the morning session, and also after that in some of our discussions. What about when we see someone that is being harmed, like a small child, or when we think of places around the world where people experience horrible situations and so forth. Still, I think that personally, individually, when we think about it from the viewpoint of karma, we have to think that we do not experience the results of actions that we haven't done before. This is how it works with karma. It's not that we can bend it.
But I think we also apply the other aspects of karma that karma magnifies, and only a Buddha knows karma. We don't know what small and what even realm of existence that karma was created.
Mm. Yeah, we don't know that, but
aspects we don't know. And so when we get, we tend to do quite a literal anthropomorphic analysis of it, as if when I was this human or that person was that human, and it's not necessarily the situation.
Mm.
So I think that can be a source of distress.
I guess.
Alan Wallace, discussed this point before, where he said, it's not right to think like a small child is getting violence against him or something. He said that that's not actually right to think that that's karma, the result of karma. I don't know, it's just, I probably needed more context to give. I guess that it's not right to think about it as karma, in the sense that when you think of a situation like, for example, when someone is being raped, let's say, and you think about it, well, this is a result of karma, which means that something that they have done before. It almost sounds as if they got the punishment, they got what they deserve, so yeah. So in that sense, it's not the right way to think about it, right? This is not a justification, or this is not the right way of thinking that, someone experiences the result of actions that they've done before, and therefore they deserve it. So rather than thinking about it like that, we do experience the results of actions that we have done before. But I think that another way or the flip side, rather than accusing someone or blaming someone for creating the actions for that experience, is to think that that's what happens when all of us are controlled by karma and afflictions. And so long as we are controlled by karma and afflictions,
for that long, we will still continue to have those horrible experiences. So, you see someone else experiencing that horrible situation, and you can think that that's what it means to be in samsara, under the power of karma and afflictions. And I myself am in that situation. I'm under the control of karma and afflictions. It can just as well happen to me. But not only it can just as well happen to me in a certain samsaric situation because of my ignorance, because of my afflictive states of mind, I can find myself in situations where I create the cause and conditions for that. So I want to do my best in order to protect myself and in order to protect other sentient beings. So I think that, if I think of, I don't know what Alan Wallace had in mind when he said that you cannot look at a small child being harmed and think about it from the viewpoint of karma. I think that probably I would interpret that. I know I didn't have a conversation with him about it, but I would interpret that in saying that you cannot blame them rather than think that, well, that's a samsaric process. Karma and afflictions create suffering.
I think that the point also is that is there something you can do about it? If we see something like that occurring, is there something that we can do about it?
Yeah.
To stop the situation, or to remove the kid, or to report it, or I don't know.
Well, we have the obligation to do it. I mean, one of our obligation is to protect the life of others, to protect sentient beings from suffering. If there's something that we can do about the situation, we're obliged to do it. Not only in living in human societies, but also as Mahayana practitioners, we are obliged to protect others.
In Rinpoche's book, Lama Purpose book, he talks in general about anger and about breaking the cycle of anger. So somebody got angry at them, and then they got angry at me, and then I get angry back at them, and so you're just perpetuating the cycle. I think what's really difficult to deal with in my mind is situations like that where it's the anger or whatever is being put on a child or a disabled person or someone who is not in a position to be able to
Protect
break
themselves.
that
Yeah.
cycle themselves. And is there anything that I can do? And I probably can't, because it's the karma of others playing out. If I can't do anything about it, it's just that balance between when you can and when you can't do something about it, and really wanting to be able to break that cycle when it's with young kids, very young kids, or disabled people, or whatever. How's it going to get broken?
But I think we see that in the world, where you might not literally in that person's situation be able to do something, but look at all the awareness about the abuse, elder abuse, child abuse, domestic violence. If you look at how many years they've actually been talked about, it's not very long.
No.
In the greater scheme of things, that you bring it into the public discourse.
But I think that here, from a Mahayana perspective, the attitude is a bit, I wouldn't say extreme. You need to take your attitude in a way that is even more far-reaching. So, of course, all of us get really uncomfortable or enraged when we see someone that doesn't have the ability to protect themselves, someone that is in a vulnerable situation being harmed. And those are the situations that we're talking about here, right? So abusing children, domestic violence, abusing the elderly.
Or even collective situations like, a few corporations destroying the planet, everybody's suffering. I do find it a little bit questionable to say that's the result of, the karma of the people who have experienced suffering. Sometimes I can see how that's the karma of the harm giver to give the harm. But then sort of refrain from saying that it's actually the person experiencing it.
Do you have another explanation?
But before we get to that, I just want to complete my point. So, no, it's okay. So, we have So when we see someone being harmed and they're in a vulnerable situation, of course we have great compassion. We are distressed by that harm, but I think that for most people, including me, kind of the automatic reaction would be to completely vilify the harm doer and perceive the person as being kind of someone that is inherently bad, inherently evil, inherently negative. So we want all harm to come to them and for the life of the innocent to be saved or protected. I mean, this is probably most of our automatic reaction. But from a Mahayana point of view, we should first of all, when you think about it in terms of karma, we do not experience the result of actions that we have not done. And also actions that we do not go to waste. They perpetuate future suffering for ourselves, but also for others. So we want to, of course, we have compassion to the one that is being harmed, but just as well, we should also have compassion to the one that is doing the harm. So often we react differently, right? So we get angry with the harm doer. We want them to suffer, but we all know we have to counteract those wishes of, for the perpetrator to experience suffering. We want, of course, the injury or the harm to stop, but we shouldn't wish them to have suffering. I mean, it's easier said than done, right? A few days ago when I heard that Trump got sick, diagnosed with coronavirus, there was like a slight moment in which I thought that, he got what he deserved. And immediately I caught myself thinking that this is not the way that I need to be thinking, but it's almost like an automatic reaction. When you think of someone that is on the harming side, you almost have that vindictive thoughts, wishing harm to come to them. But we should also have compassion to the harm doer. It doesn't mean to say that we accept what they do. But from a Mahayana perspective, we have to kind of stand guard and make sure that we wish everyone to be free from the cause of suffering and suffering.
If he wasn't suffering, he would be doing some of the things he's doing.
Yeah.
So sometimes I find it easier to have compassion for the harm doer, just in certain situations.
It's extreme.
Sorry?
Extreme? No.
Oh, just in certain situations.
Let's just make sure that we look at a couple of points in that section. So reflecting on the harm brought upon you by others is one fault from the point of view of karma. Then the cause of suffering is a disadvantage of having taken a body. So we think to ourselves, actually when we are being harmed by another person, we think that there's a person that is harming me, contributing to that situation, but just as well, I have a body that is susceptible to injury. And this body is susceptible to injury because it's a body that has been acquired under the power of karma and afflictions. So it also has a role to play. Had it been a body that is not susceptible to injury, my body, with my karma and afflictions, injury would not be there. So in that sense, you can say that there is also my responsibility in that situation. So here we're not kind of developing self-blame, in a sense that we're not considering ourselves to be bad or evil or deserving to be harmed and hit and abused and so forth. Here Shantideva is teaching ways to make harm or injury lighter, to develop a different perspective. So long as we are under the control of karma and afflictions, for that long we are susceptible to injury. There's no wonder that we're being injured, since we have a body that is in the nature of suffering. And we still crave, Shantideva says here, seeing it as a disadvantage of having craved the causes of suffering in a former life. So Geshe explained that from the viewpoint of, in previous lives, having created cause and conditions that were involved with craving, that resulted in suffering in this life. But another point that came up in my mind is that when you look at it from the viewpoint of the 12 links of dependent arising, and links number 8 and 9 are craving and grasping, which play a role in the process of, again, taking up contaminated aggregate, again, having a body that is susceptible to injury. Well, we have craved this body in a previous life upon death. Well, through the process of dying, the link of craving and grasping was definitely active. We have craved a new body. We have strong attachment. So if we have craved a body in the nature of suffering, there's no wonder that we experience suffering. All right, let's leave it here for now. Due to this virtue, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all transmigrated beings without exception to that state. May the precious Supreme Bodhisattva not yet born arise. May that reason not decline, but increase more and more. In this land encircled by snowy mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. Path, fortune, resistance, and gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. You uphold the subdued moral way, who serves the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers, honoring the three jewels, protectors of myself and others, your disciples. Please, please live long.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.